Hello again. Last week I was talking about the imaginings of the dark side and how Darth Vader said, "You don't understand the power of the dark side. Not that the dark is stronger than the light, but think about it in Norse terms for a second. Imagine if the dark side was fire and the light side was ice. Well, you could say, oh, the fire's bad. Well, if you were the ice, I suppose so. Except for that's the whole point of, well, at least a point of Voluspa, elementally especially. The fire, the sparks from the fire melt the ice, and then the streams of Niflheim, get everything going. So, if you think of Star Wars not in terms of good and bad, but rather in terms of balance, Yoda loses sight in Star Wars because the dark side blinds him. Well, the Jedi needed balance, and that was what the Chosen One, Anakin, brought about. That's why I like the idea of the Grey Jedi so much, which Qui-Gon Jinn or Mace Windu represent, and even Anakin and Obi-Wan to some extent. Last week I was saying, if Darth Maul, a what if basically. What if Darth Maul was just the dark projection of Qui-Gon Jinn, and it was part of his training, his Jedi training, to recognize the darkness and see how he responds to it, and Obi-Wan gets angry and chops it down. But what if that was just Qui-Gon's imagining? He was... the same thing happened with Luke and Yoda. Yoda told Luke, you don't need your weapon. Luke thought, no, and using the Havamal's advice of never go anywhere without your weapon. But maybe he should have trusted his master in this case. Yoda is very wise and funny too, at times. But if Luke wouldn't have brought his lightsaber into the tree, would he even have seen Darth Vader? And Darth Vader was very physical in this confrontation, even though it was just his imagination. Same with a movie like Fight Club, where you have the same character, even though one of them is just imaginary. And that makes the whole movie worth rewatching once you realize that. And, some people say Odin is Loki, but then others will tell you, well, go read the sagas, because how could they both exist simultaneously in the same spot of the saga? But if you have that Fight Club thought in mind, realizing that it could be a dreamlike explanation, in mythic context instead of so literal and historic, which everyone tends to do, thinking-wise, which is fine sometimes. But we're not reading history, we're reading mythology, and it requires a different, a shift of your paradigm to think differently, think outside the box. Which, when someone will tell you, oh, they're woke or, not sleeping, like the giants of non-consciousness. But you don't really understand until you experience it yourself what people are talking about in those regards, which most myths, or at least a lot of myths, are getting at, especially involving Odin. In those regards, the secret of the rune Nauthiz, realizing the necessity in time, would have allowed Yoda to rebalance the Jedi, or was it too late by that point? There was obviously a lot of flaws that people talk about with the Jedi, and I think it all comes down to balance.